Oh man, it feels like forever since I did the last episode since it was a day early last week. And anyways, it's time for my week 13 picks of the 2016 NFL season. And last week, win 9-7, so it is a win record. I think the second win in a row. But 9-7, that's definitely not good. And I'm actually a little surprised that even though I had a win record, my overall from last week went down. I think it was like 597. I'm 595, so that's a little disappointing. Hopefully it'll be better this week. And of course, here's the playoff bracket with just 5 weeks remaining. If the season ended today, it would be the Patriots and Raiders with the byes in the AFC, and then the Dolphins coming out of nowhere going to the Ravens, and the Chiefs going to the Texans. And the NFC, it's the Cowboys and Seahawks still remain up there with the byes, with the Redskins going to the Lions and the Giants going to the Falcons. And after 2 weeks of saying the Patriots beat the Seahawks, it's back to my original pick of the Patriots beating the Cowboys. Now that the Falcons have a barrier to stop the Giants. We get started with Thursday night tonight, and that's the Cowboys going to the Vikings for the first time since 2010. And if the Cowboys beat the Vikings, I think they're in the playoffs for the first time since 2014. And they definitely would be in the playoffs if they beat the Vikings and the Buccaneers lose on Sunday, which is probably a good chance that'll happen. But I'm pretty sure the Cowboys have a tiebreaker over the Buccaneers right now, even though they got to play them a little bit later this year. I think the Cowboys should have a tiebreaker over them. I'm not quite sure. But regardless, they win and the Buccaneers lose. The Cowboys will be in the playoffs. But although the Cowboys have now won 10 in a row, they're still in that bubble. And the Vikings, although they're struggling, they're still someone you got to watch out for, especially when they're the home team. And remember, too, the Vikings have a very, very good history against the Cowboys when they host them. The farthest back I could think of off the top of my head that the Vikings have won in a row was all the way back in 1999. The Cowboys have been at the Vikings like 3 times since 1999. 2 more if you count by playoffs. And the Vikings have won every single one of them. And I think the majority of them were blowouts, too. Remember that 2009 divisional round game? So I think the Vikings would win this 24-21, but knowing the Cowboys, I wouldn't be surprised if they pull that off too. So then we get to the Sunday games, starting with the 1 p.m. games, and that's the Chiefs going to the Falcons for the first time since 2008. Wow, what an incredible game that was for the Chiefs beating the Broncos. That was incredible. I'm surprised that ball barely went to the goalpost. Of course, once again, the Falcons destroying the Cardinals like I accurately been predicting like every single year for like the last like decade. And of course, it's one of the number one offenses in the league going against a very strong, but at the same time, inconsistent defense. And I think the offense will win today, as that day is the Falcons would beat the Chiefs 35-24. But knowing the Chiefs, you can't be surprised if they would win too. And then it's the Dolphins going to the Ravens for the first time since 2010. And ain't that something? They've been playing each other 4 years in a row, and seeing how depending on how they finish this year, they might be playing each other again next year in Baltimore, which would be quite impressive. And of course, the last time they were in Baltimore, the Ravens dominated. Matter of fact, the Dolphins, I don't think, have beaten the Ravens in Baltimore since 1997, when they were back in Memorial Stadium and when Dan Marino was still their QB. And of course, the Ravens still, I think they have the number 1 rush defense in the league. And of course, Javi, I can't fucking remember what his name's pronounced. He hasn't been this impressive. That was like that 1 week, those 2 weeks where he did like 200 yards. And of course, they're at the Ravens. They haven't beaten them in like 20 years. The Ravens still got that number 1 defense. And I have no idea how Javi would do against a very strong run defense. I have to yet to see his stats on that. So, I'm sure the Ravens will win it, 27-17. But at the same time, you gotta remember the Ravens are also a very inconsistent team that always plays games to the very, right down within a touchdown. So, Dolphins win would not surprise me either. And then it's the 49ers going to the Bears. Remember that wild finish up last year? Matter of fact, that was week 13 too, if I'm correct. And of course, if the Bears lose today, they are officially eliminated from the playoffs. And I think they would also be eliminated too if either the Redskins, Vikings, or Buccaneers won. Definitely if the Redskins win, they would be eliminated. So, oh boy. I mean, remember last year, that game went right down the wire. I think we went into overtime, and the 49ers got a very lucky touchdown, if I recall correctly. But of course, I think the Bears are somewhat more better team than the 49ers. So I think they would win 20-17. But remember what happened last year? I predicted the Bears would crush the 49ers, and the 49ers ended up winning in overtime. So I wouldn't be surprised if that happened. And then it's the Eagles going to the Bengals for the first time since 2008. Remember that? The first tie since 2002, and Donovan McNabb didn't even know that was possible to do ties. Matter of fact, I think that was the first time that ever happened when I started watching the NFL too. And of course, if the Bengals lose, they'll get their first, not only their first losing season since 2010, they'll be eliminated from the playoffs for the first time since 2010. It's either they lose or either the Broncos or Dolphins win. So, I knew they were going to struggle this year because of that demoralizing loss to the Steelers last year. I didn't think they were going to struggle this badly. That first 6 weeks of the year, they were going exactly like I thought. But after that, they were done for ever since. And of course, the Eagles and Bengals are both very inconsistent teams. Like one week they could dominate, and the other week they shit the bed. Just like the Eagles shit the bed on Monday night last week. But of course, since the Bengals have already shit the bed, they're done for pretty much. I think the Eagles would win 26-14. But knowing the Eagles as well, you can't trust them either, so don't be surprised too if the Bengals win too. And then it's the Texans going to the Packers for the first time since 2008. I remember the Texans only been there one time and they won it, so they're undefeated in Lambeau Field, although I'm sure that's not going to be the case this week. Because, oh my god, the Texans, they were 6-3 at one point. Osweiler started to look a little bit better. Yeah, they lost to Raiders in Mexico City, but he looked okay. But then, of course, last week had to throw 0 touchdowns, 3 picks against the Chargers, and they were within a touchdown of beating them, or tying them, I mean. They finally look like dead. And I'm sure after this, I think they're going to lose to the Packers 42-16. Oh boy, I can't wait till after that happens, because then they'll be in a tie with the Titans, and then if the Colts beat the Jets on Monday night, there'll be a freeway tie in the AFC South. That'll be quite interesting to see what happens then, because I'm starting to think the Titans might actually pull it off at that point if that happens. And then it's the Broncos going to the Jaguars for the first time since 2010. That was week 1 game 2, I remember correctly. And if the Jaguars lose to the Broncos or the Dolphins win, the Jaguars would be eliminated from the playoffs. What was it, that's right, they haven't been to the playoffs since 2007, one of the other longer streaks in the league. So, boy. I mean, early in this year, before the season again, I thought this was going to be very close. I actually think this was going to be in the Jaguars' favor at the beginning of the year, but now that's not really the case. I heard Trevor Siemian is struggling with injuries, which even if he doesn't play and Patrick Lynch starts, that Jaguars team's not really trustable at this point. I'm still not quite sure. I think the Jaguars probably would maybe somewhat pull off an upset, but I think the Broncos would win 31-17. And it's the Rams going to the Patriots for the first time since 2008, and I mean, what else is there to say? Really? Patriots win 45-10. It's the Lions going to the Saints. Remember that crazy Monday night game where Stafford, I think, completed 80+% of his passes, which was really incredible. I'm actually surprised how shitty the Saints defense was in that game to hold the Lions down. And of course, Lions, 7-4, leading the NFC North. And Saints are playing, so far in my eyes, a little bit better. Drew Brees is definitely playing a lot better than he did last year. And last year was a really strange luck for the Lions to pull it off, because the Saints had no defense that night, and the Lions, particularly in the passing game, was unstoppable that night. I wouldn't be surprised if the Lions did somehow pull it off, but I'm rooting for the Saints to win 34-28. And we get to the 4 p.m. game, starting with the Bills going to the Raiders for the first time since 2014. And I mean, what else is there to say? The Bills are inconsistent, untrustable. Yeah, the Raiders are inconsistent, untrustable at home. And of course, especially since we all know about Derek Carr, if he's going to be playing or not. But come on. The Raiders should easily win this 34-17. And then it's the Redskins going to the Cardinals for the first time since 2014 as well. Oh boy. I mean, the Cardinals are definitely untrustable. I think they've lost 2 losses in a row now. But I just still don't really trust the Redskins either. I mean, yeah, Kirk Cousins doing a lot better now. It's even Maya's doing somewhat better now than last year. But I mean, the Redskins have not beaten the Cardinals at their place in forever. And I mean, last time I think they might have won was 2005 there, if I'm correct. But even though the Cardinals are sputtering and near dead, I think they will pull it off 24-17. And then it's the Giants going to the Steelers for the first time since 2008. I remember that game because I watched it too. The Giants won a very close one back in 2008. And oh boy, the Steelers, finally they look much better after that complete and utter destruction against the Browns. And yeah, Giants, what was it, like 6 wins in a row now, if I'm correct? Got their first non-losing season since 2012. Oh boy. But that defense, of course, is inconsistent, untrustable. Eli's inconsistent, untrustable. And the Steelers, although they've been also inconsistent and untrustable mainly because of injuries, I trust them a hell of a lot more than I trust the Giants, and the Steelers would win 31-23. And it's the Buccaneers going to the Chargers for the first time since 2004. That's the quirks of schedule. We're still going through them. I think last year would be the final changes when they made that schedule quirk change from 2010 for the West Coast teams. And of course, like I said earlier, if the Buccaneers lose the Chargers along with the Cowboys beating the Vikings, and the Cowboys definitely would be in the playoffs. And of course, I think that would indeed happen, as the Chargers, I think, would win 40-24. Although, seeing how somewhat the Buccaneers have been when they've gone on the road, I wouldn't be surprised too if they somehow pulled it off as well. Then we get to Sunday night, and I'm so glad they didn't get rid of this, because this is like somewhat like the new rivalry pretty much in the NFC, and that's the Seahawks. Panthers going to the Seahawks, These two have played each other every year since 2012, and although, yeah, the Seahawks look much better than the Panthers are dog shit, remember, every game since 2012, and they've played each other twice now in the playoffs. Even last year when the Panthers were beating them, remember at halftime 31-0, and the Seahawks came back 31-24. All the games were within a touchdown. I think this one divisional round game in Seattle 2 years ago, that was 14 points Seahawks won by, but every other game it was within a touchdown or even a field goal in the majority of the cases, and that's even when the Panthers have been pretty inconsistent and bad somewhat this entire couple years. So even though the Panthers are terrible, you got to think it's going to be close against the Seahawks. But since it's at home, I think the Seahawks will win it 31-27 and get their first win season since 2015. And then finally, that's the Monday night game, and a game I never ever understand why they made this a Monday night game, especially after the destruction the Jets gave them last year. And that was the Colts going to the Jets for the first time since 2012. That was Luck's rookie year. Really, why the hell would you put this on Monday night after we saw the Jets embarrass the Colts in week 2 last year? Remember that 20-17? That offensive line of the Colts was so terrible in that game? Why the fuck would they make this on Monday night? But of course, the Jets still struggling. Colts are still inconsistent too, but it's hard to believe if the Colts beat the Jets and the Packers beat the Texans, we'll have a freeway tie for the AFC South. And quite surprisingly, the Titans are in it too. You would have thought the Jaguars would have been in it instead. But of course, I would probably say the Colts, but they're inconsistent. And then of course, that debacle destruction they had last year against the Jets really is in the back of my head way too much to just forget about it. So I think the Jets would pull it off 28-26. But knowing them as well, I wouldn't be surprised either if the Colts won. So that's my picks for Week 13. I can't wait for this week, and I can't wait for the Cowboys at Vikings tonight. Can't wait to hopefully see the Cowboys make a playoff spot. And hopefully next week, at the end of this week, we'll have a couple more playoff picks possibly set. So that